This Week with George Stephanopoulos starts right now.
Economic turmoil.
Many countries have taken advantage of us. That has to stop.
New tariffs take effect this week, upending global alliances, shaking business and consumer confidence, and rattling the markets. What will this mean for the economy? Diane Swonk breaks it down. And scathing resignation. The FDA's top vaccine official steps down, accusing HHS Secretary RFK Jr. of pushing misinformation and lies. Dr. Ashish Jha joins us on all the fallout. Stunning leak.
There's no units, no locations, no routes, no flight paths.
Top administration officials downplay discussing attack plans for Yemen on the Signal app, where they inadvertently included a journalist.
This is utterly unprofessional. There's been no apology.
How will Congress respond? We'll ask Senate Intelligence Committee Vice Chair Mark Warner and former House Intelligence Committee Chair Mike Turner. Plus,
we have some interest in Greenland from the Trump administration.
Vice President J.D. Vance visits Greenland as Trump ramps up his expansionist rhetoric. Terry Moran reports live from the Danish territory, and former NATO Supreme Allied Commander James Stavridis reacts.
From ABC News, it's This Week. Here now, Martha Raddatz.
Good morning and welcome to This Week. There has been a tidal wave of political news this week from the stunning revelation that top Trump officials discussed attack plans for airstrikes on Yemen long before they happened, all on a group message thread that included a journalist, to the reported forced resignation of the nation's top vaccine official late Friday, to the vice president's quick trip to Greenland. We'll get to all those stories in a moment, but we begin with the economic fallout and uncertainty from the latest tariffs scheduled to launch in just days. The president set to escalate his trade war this week as markets reel over tariffs he's already put in place. So how will Trump's next moves shape the economy, and how do Americans feel about it? ABC's senior White House correspondent Selina Wang starts us off.
This week, the stock market plunging as President Trump doubles down on his trade war. This month set to be the worst sell-off since September 2022. Trump announcing new 25% tariffs on all cars and auto parts made outside the U.S.
This is very exciting to me. This is the automobile industry, and this will continue to spur growth like you haven't seen before.
The president adamant these tariffs will boost manufacturing at home, but economists warn they'll raise prices for consumers. About half of vehicles sold in the U.S. are imported. Moody's estimates the cost of a new car could increase more than $6,000 by this time next year. Among Singh runs a Toyota dealership in New York. He says they've been flooded with concerned calls.
We've been telling them, hey, listen, we have cars here. If you pick something I have here, it's that price.
Those new tariffs kick in on Thursday, just one day after Trump is set to announce sweeping retaliatory tariffs on imports from many countries around the world. Trump holding a call with Canada's new prime minister on Friday.
We had a very, very good talk. We have Liberation Day, as you know, on April 2nd.
Carney warning the U.S. is no longer a reliable partner, vowing to retaliate with their own tariffs on U.S. products.
The old relationship we had with the United States, based on deepening integration of our economies and tight security and military cooperations, is over.
This lumberyard owner telling me recently that tariffs on Canadian lumber will hit his business hard.
It's going to hurt my sales in the long run.
President Trump says that foreign countries pay the price of tariffs.
Well, if it costs me 25%, my customers are going to pay for it.
The uncertainty around tariffs sending consumer confidence tumbling. A University of Michigan survey shows consumer sentiment is now at a 3-year low, and Trump's own standing plummeting. A new Gallup poll finding 59% of Americans disapprove of his handling of the economy.
And Martha, Friday's jobs report is expected to be another key indicator of whether businesses are holding back because of the tariffs. And for the first time, the report is expected to show the impact of President Trump and Elon Musk's sweeping cuts to the federal workforce. Martha?
And our thanks to Selina. I'm joined now by Diane Swonk, Chief Economist and Managing Director at the accounting firm KPMG. It's great to see you this morning. Diane, these are slated to be the most significant rounds of tariffs yet. The president calls it Liberation Day. There's already reaction with the markets tumbling on Friday after some gains. So what are you seeing?
Well, what we're seeing is we've seen consumers are already very concerned about this, and there's some hunkering down behavior. Even the Federal Reserve's Beige Book, which sort of looks at economic conditions across all the different districts, there's not only reports of people front-running tariffs, trying to produce and stockpile ahead of tariffs, but also increases in price and the intention to pass them on to consumers, which is why consumers are not very happy at the moment. What we're also concerned about is what employment is looking like, because we've had two consumer surveys now. One is a Conference Board, one is the University of Michigan Sentiment Survey, and they both show two things: an increase in inflation expectations and a deterioration in job expectations and job security. That's a very worrisome combination. It has that flavor of stagflation to it, a mild bout of stagflation.
And so what is the outlook because of that for consumers? What should they be thinking?
Well, we've seen across every income group, every age, every demographic, every wealth strata, and every party affiliation, a major deterioration in consumer confidence. Even the wealthiest households, which now account for a disproportionate amount of overall spending, they're starting to say that they're not confident in the economy and their future finances. That's very important because they account for almost half, 10% of households account for almost half of all spending in the U.S. economy, which also speaks to how the inequality that we are already seeing in the U.S. economy, which is quite stark. And that's why we worry about tariffs, because tariffs are a regressive tax. They hit those with low and middle incomes much harder than higher incomes. But even among the highest income strata, you're seeing sort of a tentativeness. And on days where we see the stock market go down, you can literally see almost in real time spending at luxury goods stores pull back. And I think that's important to remember as well.
And Diane, specifically on the 25% tariffs on cars and car parts made outside the U.S., Trump said prices will go down because it will incentivize companies to build in the U.S. Do you agree?
The economics does not suggest that at all, and I'm not alone. It's the economic consensus that actually, in fact, car prices will go up. And what we tend to see is some of it will be absorbed in margins and some of it will show up in layoffs as higher costs go up in terms of production. But it's just very hard to find things that are solely produced in the United States. And even those car makers that are most insulated from tariffs do get some kind of parts from abroad or steel that is going to increase the cost of that vehicle. Another important issue is the uncertainty of tariffs via executive order. They can literally change with, a pen stroke. Because of that, there's no certainty on how long they'll actually last. And that's important when you're thinking about building a plant and bringing production back. That takes 3 to 5 years to do, and then you've got to have the workers to be able to work in it. That's not an easy commitment to make when you don't know what the future is actually going to hold with regard to tariffs.
Sounds like a lot to worry about there, Diane, but we appreciate your time this morning.
Thank you.
Also breaking late this week, the sudden departure of the FDA's top vaccine expert, Dr. Peter Marks. This coming as the workforce at HHS is being slashed by 25%, and the measles outbreak across the country is growing. So let's bring in Dr. Ashish Jha, Dean of the Brown University School of Public Health, who served as White House COVID-19 response coordinator in the Biden administration. It's good to see you this morning, Dr. Jha. Peter Marks played a crucial role in the development of the COVID-19 vaccine, and we are told by an official familiar with Marks' resignation that it wasn't really a resignation, that he was pushed out, basically. This is what he said in his resignation letter. It has become clear that truth and transparency are not desired by the secretary, but rather he wishes subservient confirmation of his misinformation and lie. Your reaction to all of this?
Well, first of all, it's good to be back. And this is a tragic moment. Peter Marks is one of the best scientists in America, was the chief scientific architect, as you said, of Operation Warp Speed, President Trump's signature initiative in the pandemic. But more and more recently, he has been pushed to advocate for quack vitamins and cod liver oil and not the thing that we know works for measles, which is vaccines. And for someone with his scientific integrity, I think it just got to be too much.
You have made no secret about your concern over RFK Jr. as HHS secretary. He is also planning to establish a so-called vaccine injury agency within the CDC.
Yeah, look, we absolutely should be tracking side effects and injuries from vaccines. They're rare, but they happen, and it's important to assess them. What he is doing is elevating that issue to a point and bringing in people who are not scientists, who are going to make the data on injuries and side effects much more dramatic than they are. Like, we should be tracking it. CDC does track it. What he's doing is really augmenting that issue in a way that is totally inappropriate. We don't do that for any other medicines. We shouldn't be doing that for vaccines.
And people hear this. It has an effect.
Absolutely. And we know it has an effect because we're seeing vaccination rates among children declining. And that, of course, is putting kids across America at risk.
And what about the cuts at HHS? They announced this week that it'll eventually be 20,000, 25% of the workforce. Look, you can look across the federal government and say, could there be cuts anywhere? But when you look at HHS, is this a realistic cut?
Well, look, I served in government. I will tell you the government could be a lot more efficient, no doubt about it. The question is, how are you going about those cuts? And what are the positions you're eliminating? They're going to get rid of people who do inspections of nursing homes to make sure nursing homes are safe. They're going to get rid of people who go into factories to make sure our drug supply is safe. So what I'm worried about is not so much the cuts, but where the cuts are going to be. Are they going to be targeted and thoughtful? So far, we've seen no evidence that these cuts are targeted and thoughtful, and I actually am really worried about the impact on the health and safety of Americans.
And speaking of health and safety, the measles outbreak, 400 cases of measles in Texas alone, nearly 500 cases nationwide. We've been hearing this over the last couple of months. Is it something we should be super concerned about at this point?
It is, and I'll tell you why. We have already surpassed the number of cases we had in 2024, and we're still just in March. We are on track to have the worst measles outbreak of this century, of the last 25 years. This is all wholly preventable. We've already had 2 people die. I'm worried we're going to see more children get very, very sick and die. We should not be at this point in our country, and yet here we are because of bad information being spread by Secretary Kennedy and others.
Okay, thanks for joining us this morning. Good to see you, Dr. Jha. Up next, was it classified or not? Senate Intel Vice Chair Mark Warner joins me for the latest on that high-level, very sensitive group chat. It was a jaw-dropping disclosure, that Signal Group thread where top administration officials discussed sensitive military plans in a group chat that included The Atlantic's Jeffery Goldberg, inadvertently added to the group by National Security Advisor Mike Waltz, who, like the rest of the administration, has tried mightily to brush the controversy aside.
This week, the Trump administration downplaying, deflecting, and at times outright dismissing an extraordinary national security breach.
There was no harm done because the attack was unbelievably successful that night.
Nobody was texting war plans.
The messages at the heart of the group chat on the commercial messaging app Signal contained detailed attack plans from Defense Secretary Hegseth 2.5 hours before U.S. forces launched airstrikes on targets in Yemen. Team update, Hegseth wrote, weather is favorable. Just confirmed with CENTCOM, we are a go for mission launch. Hegseth then detailing the sequencing hour by hour. 12:15 ET, F-18's launch, first strike package. 13:45, F-18 first strike window starts. Target terrorist is at his known location, so should be on time. Also, strike drones launch, MQ-9s. More F-18s launch, second strike package. Then telling the group that at 14:15, strike drones on target, adding, this is when the first bombs will definitely drop. Hegseth still insisting that he did nothing wrong.
There's no units, no locations, no routes, no flight paths.
But for this operation, there was only one plausible F-18 unit and only one plausible location, the USS Truman, a carrier in the Red Sea, which did indeed carry out the attacks.
Thank you very much. We're heading off.
Strike plans before they launched. Mr. Secretary, how do you square away
The chat group included Vice President Vance, National Security Advisor Mike Waltz, Secretary of State Marco Rubio, Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard, and CIA Director John Ratcliffe, among others. Throughout this week, the administration repeatedly claiming that no one shared any classified information in the group chat.
There was no classified information, as I understand it.
Or as Marco Rubio did.
Obviously, someone made a mistake. Someone made a big mistake and added a journalist.
Waltz did take responsibility for accidentally adding the reporter.
I take full responsibility. I built the group.
But Pete Hegseth, on an overseas trip this week, has not changed his tune, no matter what the question.
And I'm quite proud of what our forces in CENTCOM did on that initial series of very effective and devastating strikes.
And joining me now to talk about this is Democratic Senator Mark Warner, Vice Chair of the Senate Intelligence Committee. Good to see you, Senator.
Good morning.
There have been very strong denials from the administration that there was anything classified. So quite simply, was this classified information or not?
Absolutely. It was of such a nature when you were doing the actual battle plans and the timing and what type of aircraft were being sent out. If you had been a traditional military officer or a CIA caseworker and you were this sloppy and careless with this classified information, you would be fired. No doubt about it.
So let's talk about this, though. They keep saying it was not classified. And what is the confusion there? Could Pete Hegseth have since made it unclassified? Do different agencies have different classifications?
There is no question, regardless of agency, that this was classified. And the point, what I wish Hegseth and those folks who are obfuscating as giving them the benefit of the doubt, I think they're lying about, they should know this is classified.
You think every person who says this is lying?
I think there is no question when you put out time and place, and I was yesterday down in Hampton Roads. I did 2 big town halls, Virginia Beach and Chesapeake. There were people in the town hall who were either friends or relatives of folks who were on the Truman. The Truman is the aircraft carrier that's been deployed to the Mediterranean. Those folks were saying if their friends or loved ones were flying those jets and that information had been released and the Houthis were able to change their defensive posture, we could have lost American lives. And folks in Hampton Roads know that.
That's a big military community.
It's a big military community because, again, it insults the intelligence of the American people when somebody says, oh, no, nothing classified here. And remember, again, to add to this, this is not a one-off. In the first 2 weeks, they mistakenly gave up the information of about 200 CIA agents, their identities. They can't be deployed now. They, in the subsequent thing, the Musk boys put out a list of properties. Included on that was a classified spot. And then they printed the whole budget and headcount of another agency. These are all things that are evidence of the sloppy, careless approach.
I want to stick to this particular incident, and I want to talk about the Signal app in particular, where this group chat started. This is what Attorney General Pam Bondi told Fox News this week. Let's listen.
I think Signal's a very safe way to communicate. I don't think foreign adversaries are able to hack Signal, as far as I know.
Is that true?
Signal is safer than your normal cell phones. It is encrypted. But if Ms. Bondi had looked at any of the guidance from the intelligence community, which states explicitly, do not use Signal for classified information.
Do you use Signal?
I use Signal to talk to someone because it is safer. I actually encourage people to use Signal, but that still doesn't mean because it's safer, you can put classified information. Matter of fact, again, if Miss Bondi knew anything about her job, she would know that we have reports of China and Russia both trying to break into Signal.
So you say you use it because it's safer, but what is it that you're talking about that you need to keep safe?
Listen, my personal conversations, I'm sure your personal conversations, we know that after Salt Typhoon, China can penetrate any of those calls. So being on Signal, smarter, yes. Is it able to put classified information? Absolutely not. And matter of fact, one of the things we've been asking, have we collected back the phones from these individuals to make sure there's not malware? The bad guys could put malware into your phone if they've got access, even without touching it.
And we don't have information. Very quickly, if you can. The administration has been rightly very critical of the Biden administration on the disastrous Afghanistan withdrawal, but they have also asked about accountability. There was no accountability, really, in that either.
Listen, I thought the withdrawal from Afghanistan was a disaster. I'm first to agree with that. We have a classic screw up right here. If there is no accountability, not only will the military and the intel people say, why are our bosses not being held to a higher standard? And then our friends, you've already read in public reporting how upset the Israelis are based upon some of their information.
But should there have been accountability for the Afghanistan withdrawal?
I think there should be accountability whenever there are screw ups of that nature or this nature.
Okay, thanks for joining us this morning, Senator Warner. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Martha.
As for the Republican reaction to the Signal Group, it has been mostly muted.
I don't think anyone should have lost their job over that, because an errant number, found its way onto a dialogue between leaders.
It was a mistake. I'm sure he regrets it. I'm sure he's going to be hyper cautious next time, but give him a pass. The guy just started.
I fail to see what the big deal is. I mean, they're discussing among themselves.
This is not going to lead to the apocalypse. And a mistake was made. It'll be corrected. But frankly, most Americans don't care.
And I'm joined now by Republican Congressman Mike Turner, the former chair of the House Intelligence Committee, who has already called this very concerning. You heard what your colleagues on the Hill were saying. Is it a big deal?
Well, Martha, thank you for having me. Well, first off, this was a very successful operation, and there were no consequences. The operation itself was not impacted, but oversight is working. The Senate Armed Services Committee, on a bipartisan basis, requested an Inspector General investigation into this matter, to the use of Signal, and to the issue of whether or not classified information was used, the source of the information in the Signal discussion. And that's very important because it goes to really the heart of the source of the information and really the inconsistency across agencies as to the use of Signal and the appropriateness of the use of Signal.
So let me ask you specifically what I asked Senator Warner. Do you think that some of those messages, particularly ones Pete Hegseth sent, were classified?
Well, clearly the subject matter that's being discussed, the status of ongoing military operations, should be and considered classified information, and it's surprising to find it in an unclassified manner. To find it in this way is surprising. It is not, however, war plans, and the Atlantic and Goldberg.
But is that sort of a word game in a way? They were attack plans. I mean, he said when the F-18s would launch. So is that, war plans, attack plans?
They were really attack plans. They were on discussions of ongoing military operations. But in that, the Atlantic and Goldberg really did oversell. They really did lose some credibility. But beyond that, it does go to the issue of whether or not, the White House has said that there was no classified information being discussed. And I think it is surprising people are struggling with the information that's there because this information really has at its roots classified content.
So you would say it is classified?
I would say that the White House perhaps is being legalistic and that the individuals that are discussing this information certainly have the ability to declassify the information. And as they made the decision to enter into a declassified conversation, it was perhaps declassified. And that's something I think that goes
by
to...
Hegseth?
Perhaps, and that goes to the issue of perhaps what we're going to see in this Inspector General investigation that the Senate Armed Services Committee has requested. They've actually asked both to look into the use of Signal across agencies, but also the source of this information. Was this information, when it was given to the individuals, classified in its nature? How was it given to them? And then what decisions were made? Because it also goes to the issue of judgment. Was it classified when it was given to them? Did they declassify it? But also, what decisions were made? Should it have been used?
So you're saying that's possible. So you're saying it is possible that Pete Hegseth, when he wrote those messages, it was classified, and then since he said, oh, it's not classified in everyone else, it had been declassified.
He would have been within his authority. It's something the Inspector General will look at. It also goes to the issue of judgment. Should this have been discussed in a signal content? Now, the director of NSA in front of the Intelligence Committee of the House, in response to Representative Crow's question, did indicate, as you've asked the question, that Signal is a vulnerable platform. Now, both China and Russia have compromised at times Signal, and there are questions as to whether or not they would have access to the content, especially with the number of people that are there. Even if a journalist hadn't accidentally been placed in it, to have that number of people and with that type of conversation happening, you do have to wonder whether or not the conversation would be vulnerable.
Do you think there should be some accountability, and do you have confidence in Secretary Hegseth and Mike Waltz going forward? We
Absolutely.
Have a few seconds.
Absolutely. I think they're doing an excellent job. They're incredibly important to our national security. And certainly there was no impact on this operation. It was a great operation, and I think they're doing an excellent job. I do think, though, that both the Armed Services Committee, the Intelligence Committees, are taking up this issue, and I think that there will be a review going forward as to whether or not Signal should be used and whether or not these types of conversations should occur.
Very quickly, do you think lives could have been lost if it had gotten into the wrong hands, as Senator Warner said?
I think this is one of the discussions that people will have as to whether or not the Signal should be used. I do think that it is a platform that can be compromised, and that perhaps these types of discussions should not be used. I personally do not use Signal because of the fact that people, when they get into that platform, have an assumption of privacy that it just does not provide.
Thank you so much for joining us this morning. Appreciate it. And for more on the politics of all of this and the efforts at damage control, I'm joined by former New Jersey Governor Chris Christie. Good morning, Governor. You have seen the efforts by the administration to clean this up, so to speak, deflect and dodge, and say the operation worked well, which it did. Are these efforts working?
Well, in some respect, yes, Martha, but let's get to the core of this. The administration, everyone in the administration is required to sing out of one hymnal, and it's the hymnal that Donald Trump wrote back when he was a real estate tycoon in New York City. It is two words: deny and deflect. And that's the way he's handled everything from his net worth, when he didn't like what Forbes wrote about him, to the value of his buildings or other properties, when he didn't like the way other people talked about them publicly, and the way he acts as president. Now, the first thing they said was just to deny that it was any problem, deny there was any issue. And then when that was not effective on the pure denial, they continued to deny, but then they deflect as well. And talk about other issues. The biggest ones have been, as you said, the success of the attack itself, which was undeniably successful, but not the point. Secondly, was to talk about both the Biden administration and the horrible loss of life in Afghanistan that their operation led to back in the early part of the Biden administration, and to attack Jeffery Goldberg as a journalist, even though at the same time they were confirming that everything he put in there in terms of the text chain was authentic. They want to just deny and deflect, and that's what they're doing. And in some quarters, it is successful, and in some, as you can hear on the show this morning, it's not been.
But do you think this goes away just because of that blitz? It's really constant, and news stories are bound to fade away. So does it work?
It depends on what Congress does. If in fact, as Congressman Turner just said, there are some significant oversight hearings, then that will put more gasoline onto this. And I'll tell you the way you can tell if Donald Trump doesn't think it's going away: someone gets fired. If he thinks it's not going away, he'll figure the way to end it is that. But remember the difference in this administration from the first one. Mike Flynn, who was his national security advisor at the time, Waltz now in trouble. Mike Flynn was gone by February 13th over his failure to disclose his contacts with Russian officials during the transition. Mike Waltz, he's holding on to. I think he thinks firing Flynn back in 2017 was a mistake. So if he fires Flynn or Hegseth now, or rather Waltz or Hegseth now, you'll know that Donald Trump thinks that deny and deflect in this instance was a failure.
And in Trump 1, you didn't have quite so many loyalists. Things are a little different now with all these loyalists. Does he just not want to have that come up again, that he fires people?
Yeah, he generally likes this group more and trusts this group more than he did in the first term. Why? Because most of the time they just say, yes, sir. Where in the first term, there were a lot of people questioning him. White House counsel Don McGahn was one of them, who would question on a regular basis actions like these. And you go to Pompeo at the CIA, Tillerson at State, Pompeo, General Mattis at Defense, Bill Barr when he became the Attorney General. Those were experienced people who would question the president. Right now, you have experienced people in many instances who don't question the president at all.
Okay, thanks, Christie. Coming up, the vice president left the scandal in D.C. behind this week, traveling to Greenland, the Arctic territory Donald Trump would like to claim. We'll go live from Greenland when we come back.
We need Greenland for national security and even international security, and we're working with everybody involved to try and get it. I think that's why NATO might have to get involved in a way, because we really need Greenland for national security. I think Greenland's going to be something that maybe is in our future.
President Trump has made acquiring the Danish-owned territory of Greenland a top priority, saying the U.S. cannot live without it. So J.D. Vance did a scouting tour this week, and our senior national correspondent Terry Moran was there and covered it all.
This week, a historic and fraught trip to Greenland. Vice President J.D. Vance becoming the highest-ranking U.S. official ever to visit Greenland, leading a delegation to the U.S. Space Force base far above the Arctic Circle, dubbed the top of the world.
We need to ensure that America is leading in the Arctic.
Vance's mission here pushed President Trump's expansionist ambition to get U.S. control of Greenland, which is a part of Denmark, a U.S. ally. The president again this week declaring,
I think we'll go as far as we have to go. We need Greenland. And the world needs us to have Greenland.
The vice president here echoing Trump's concerns that Russia and China are expanding their military presence in the Arctic.
What is the alternative? To give up the North Atlantic? To give up the Arctic? To China? To Russia? We have no other option. We need to take a significant position in Greenland.
And Vance slammed the Danish government on Danish territory.
Our message to Denmark is very simple. You have not done a good job by the people of Greenland.
Trump also says he wants Greenland in part for its resources.
There are riches in this wild land, especially those rare earth minerals. Very difficult to mine in this environment, but the sky's the limit for their value.
All this has Greenlanders anxious, even fearful.
How would you say people are responding to the vice president's visit?
Well, quite negatively, to be honest. People are afraid here in Greenland, and as I talk to people, people are actually sleepless about this. Is he going to strangle us economically? Is he going to put troops on the ground?
The vice president sought to assuage those fears.
We do not think that military force is ever going to be necessary.
But hours after Vance's remarks, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth posting this video on X, celebrating the U.S. military control and defense of Greenland during World War II.
While Germany controlled Europe, the Nazis set their sights on the Arctic. Greenland became an unwitting combatant, and the United States stepped in, not to conquer, but to protect.
That video seems to have backfired with many Greenlanders who sense a threat in it. And even this weekend, President Trump talking about using the military to get what he wants here, saying, quote, I think there's a good possibility we could do it without military force, but adding, I don't take anything off the table. Martha?
Our thanks to Terry up there in the frigid cold, and I'm joined now by retired Admiral James Stavridis, who served as Supreme Allied Commander of NATO. He's the author of the new book, The Admiral's Bookshelf, and that's quite a bookshelf you got. You said 5,000 books there. But let's get to Greenland. You commanded that base that J.D. Vance toured as part of your job as U.S. European Commander. How important is that base to Greenland, to our national security?
Absolutely crucial, and it's parked geographically and guards the approaches to the North Atlantic, meaning it can look at any kind of air track coming, notably from Russia. It can help track submarines going south from Russian waters. It is absolutely crucial to U.S. national security and our presence in the Arctic.
Well, you've listened to President Trump. You saw J.D. Vance up there. You see how they are handling. President Trump hasn't ruled out military intervention. Do we have to have it? And is there a different way that they could have approached this?
The right approach would be not to send the 82nd Airborne up there. Send up the Secretary of the Treasury. Send up the Commandant of the Coast Guard. Work with them in a way that makes it a win-win outcome. That means working with Denmark, with the Greenlanders themselves, and offering them perhaps the kind of free association we have with the Marshall Islands in the Pacific. At the end of the day, Martha, sometimes how you go about doing something is the most crucial part of it. No military intervention, but plenty of economic incentives.
In your former jobs, of course, you worked with allies. How would you describe, given I'm sure you've seen what J.D. Vance said on the Signal app and Pete Hegseth on the Signal app, calling Europe pathetic freeloaders, how do you think our relationship with Europe is right now?
It's deteriorating, and my networks, which are deep, as you would imagine, after 4 years as Supreme Allied Commander of NATO, have lit up roughly since early February with the Vice President's speech at the Munich Security Conference. What they all heard on the Signal chat was just the raw, unvarnished slam. That doesn't help our relationships. And final thought, Martha, this is an intelligence failure. It will also lead to our allies being less inclined to share their high-grade intelligence with us if they think we can't protect it properly.
Admiral, you've had so many important jobs over the years, including senior military assistant to Donald Rumsfeld. So when you look at what happened with that Signal app, do you think that could have put lives at risk?
I have no doubt that it could have. Anytime you reveal tactical information, you don't know where it ends up. Potentially Russia, China, could they talk to Iran, which could talk to the Houthis? Absolutely, it would put lives at risk.
Do you think there should be accountability?
I believe that's up to the commander-in-chief himself, the president. I think what there should be immediately is a thorough, public, and transparent investigation. Where are those cell phones now? What other information, what other conversations were conducted upon them? We've got a lot of disclosed information out there. Big decisions ahead. Let's start with a thorough investigation.
Admiral, it's always great to see you, and good luck with the new book. Thanks so much this morning. We're back with the Roundtable in just a moment. And we're back now with the Roundtable. Former DNC Chair Donna Brazile, former RNC Chair and former Trump White House Chief of Staff Reince Priebus, and David Sanger, White House and National Security Correspondent for the New York Times. Good morning, everybody. Donna, I want to get to something we haven't talked about today, which are those key elections in Florida and Wisconsin this week, a real indicator of how people feel about Donald Trump's first 100 days. We're not quite there yet. Wisconsin is the state Supreme Court, Florida, 2 congressional districts. Elon Musk heavily going after that Wisconsin election. Donna.
Well, as you know, Martha, just a week ago in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, Democrats flipped that seat. It was a state seat. It allowed the Democrats to take control of the Pennsylvania legislature. I think this seat in Wisconsin, the Supreme Court seat, it is a bellwether. It is a test. It's a critical seat because it's not just about the amount of money Elon Musk is able to pour, because everybody knows he got more money. This is about voting rights, about abortion rights. It's about collective bargaining. The people of Wisconsin understand what's at stake, and their votes will not be bought. Now, those 2 congressional seats down in Florida, they're ruby red seats, but I do believe
Mike Waltz, Matt Gaetz.
That's right. They're competitive. And you know why they're competitive? Because voters are fed up with Trump and Musk. And I do believe that the Democrats are watching these seats closely, and there may be an upset in one of those seats.
Elon Musk is definitely watching that with giveaways, and the Florida race as well, a little tighter.
A little tighter, but they're not. They're going to be blowouts, Martha. The reality is, back to Wisconsin, my home state, there couldn't be any more at stake than this election. If you think about Wisconsin, we've got redistricting. That means with this slim majority in the House, 2 seats could flip the other direction. The reason is, for the viewers, is that there's a 4-3 liberal majority in the Supreme Court. And with this seat, if the conservative Brad Schimmel wins, there'll be a 4-3 conservative majority in the Supreme Court. All of those reforms of Scott Walker, the protests, the years of changes of the laws are at stake. If you remember, a great governor by the name of Tommy Thompson started the first private school choice in the state of Wisconsin. Everything's at stake, and here's what it comes down to. It comes down to whether Trump voters show up. And the most important thing that's happened over the last week is Donald Trump came out, endorsed Brad Schimmel. It was risky because it's a tight race, and the Republicans have turned that endorsement into a bonanza. So we'll see if Trump voters come out, Schimmel will win.
I'm going to make a very quick turn here from that, which is very important, to another very important topic this week, and that is tariffs, David Sanger. President Trump telling Kristen Welker today the auto tariffs are permanent, and he couldn't care less if companies raise prices because people will then buy American-made cars. You heard Diane Swonk at the top of the show. But how do you think this plays out? The economy, he's not doing so well in polls with the economy. Can people write it out?
It depends on how long it lasts, and so the most important thing he said is that first line, which is basically that these are permanent. Most presidents have used tariffs as a negotiating tool, right? You put them on, you're trying to solve a particular problem. The Chinese are subsidizing solar panels. You put tariffs on their solar panels to be able to go work a deal out. That's not the way Donald Trump thinks about these. He thinks tariffs are an ends to the means. Right? That they are themselves a way to get foreign powers to pay the cost of running the U.S. government instead of taxes. And if you don't believe me, just go back to his inaugural address, where he hails President McKinley. Most Americans haven't been thinking about McKinley for some time, but it's a very 1890s view of the way the economy operates without paying attention to what you get from software and services and things he's not tariffing.
And I'm going to be just like Donald Trump in rapid fire here, one issue after the other. And I want to move to deportation. Donna, we saw that video, that very stunning video of the young woman, a PhD candidate at Tufts University in Boston, get arrested. The administration saying she was a supporter of Hamas. There was an op-ed that she was part of. She does not mention Hamas. She mentions the Palestinian people, Donna.
Look, I don't know what the strategy is. It's like tariff. I think Donald Trump makes it up every day because he wants to get everything done quickly and forget about making mistakes because, of course, he's above the law. This is absolutely wrong. These individuals deserve due process. They deserve to have an opportunity to go to court, to make their case. And if the administration has evidence that they have violated the law in any way, fine, prove it. Prove it in the courts.
Well, they are going to prove it. I mean, the fact of the matter is the president wants to reshape the American economy, wants to bring manufacturing back to the United States. So we're making stuff here instead of China. It's a hard process. Not suggesting it's easy. That's what he wants to do. I think the American people are, at least in the election, they saw that. But as far as these students, I mean, the fact is they are here through a temporary permission to be here. They are students. They are taking spots up in our universities that our kids can't even get into,
We're a nation of laws.
And they can't, listen. But,
We're a nation of laws.
And they will
if they
prove it.
did something wrong,
a nation of laws, but
take
they're
them
not
to court
U.S. citizens.
and give them their rights.
You can't shut down buildings, make people feel unsafe. Guess what? The American people are going to support this, just like
David, I want to turn
Venezuela.
to David on this because immigration was a huge win for Donald Trump. It was not a win for Joe Biden and his administration. So people look at that and say, his supporters say, look at that, he's done it. Crossing the border is way down. But is this possibly, with these students, a step too far?
It seems like a different category. So there are illegal immigrants. If you're here illegally, no question the government.
And by the way, we don't know the full story here either. We should say that.
We should say that. If you're here illegally, though, you know, I don't think people fundamentally have a difficulty with deporting folks. If you are here on a legal student visa, as it appears this young woman at Tufts was, then the question is, can the Secretary of State simply designate that your presence is adverse to the United States? Well, clearly, legally, he can. The second question is, should you do that without some process, some due process here? And that's what is getting sorted through. When you read the editorial, it looks like what they're doing is throwing her out for a view that she took that you might agree with or might disagree with, but that would have First Amendment protections if you were a citizen, or it would have First Amendment protections if you were a permanent resident. She was neither one of those. That's the core question.
Okay. And Reince, I want to quickly go to you on this Signal group chat.
Oh,
You've talked to some people about this. How do you think at this point President Trump is actually feeling about all this? Is Mike Waltz safe? Is Pete Hegseth safe?
Well, first of all, most political scandals usually don't take people down. It's political opponents that take people down. But in your particular case, a question, no, I don't think the president is happy about it. I know that, first of all, it was a mistake to use Signal, number one. Pick up the secure line, go talk to people in the Situation Room. Once the people do things around the president that either embarrassing or a mistake, that person now has a target on their back. Right. They have to be just about perfect from now on. And the president is going to be, the president's going to be watching you now. I've lived through this. And the president isn't just whistling past the graveyard here thinking this is just no big deal. The president cares about this stuff, and he's watching. And now it's very difficult to climb out of that hole.
So it is definitely something to watch. We're out of time, guys. Sorry about that. And that's all for us today. Thanks for sharing part of your Sunday with us. The rest of us are all going to go out and check out Washington, D.C.'s gorgeous cherry blossoms. And we'll check out world news tonight. Have a great day, everyone.